Well, hello everybody. You're all very welcome to Lighthouse. My name is Jamie. I'm the lead pastor here. So glad to have all of you with us today. We are so excited that you are here, and also because we're kicking off a brand new series called What Happy Couples Know. We understand that one of the primary things in the scriptures that God talks about is relationships. In fact, our worship is nothing more than our relationship with Him. And God has a lot to say in His Word, a lot of wisdom, a lot of advice, a lot of good stuff for our relationship with Him, but also for our relationship with one another. So if you're new today, you just joined us, you're very welcome. And if you're here and you're married or have been married or want to be married one day, I'm just really trusting over the next couple of weeks, so much of what we're going to unpack is just relationship gold that will help you to also experience happiness in your relationships. Now, at this point, I know what's happening. Some of the guys in the room are going, oh, here we go, not a series on relationships. All the ladies are going, thank God, it's about time we got onto this series. And before we jump in, I want to just kind of highlight something very important to the guys and to the ladies about how we work, because obviously we work differently. And I just want to say to the guys from the get-go, this is not going to be a series where for 4 weeks we're going to hammer you for all the things that you don't do that you should do. And ladies, don't let me hear you say, because this is a two-way street. And, if you think about it, asking a guy to sit down and talk about our relationship, let's talk about our marriage, it's kind of like in some cases where, some of you ladies, not all of you, but some of you ladies, when it comes to the health and well-being of your car, simply put, let me say it like this. Men view the health of their relationships a lot like most women view the maintenance of their car. Meaning, if it's not broke down, it's not broken. If it's still running, then why do we need to fix it? Of course, that's part of the issue, but I want to encourage us all that this is not a guy thing or a lady thing. This is a we thing. This is an us thing. This is a human thing. This is a relationship thing, and we all are going to have some things that are going to challenge us over the next couple of weeks, some things we're going to learn over the next couple of weeks, and some things we're going to have to own and implement if we want to be in happy relationships. Now, The challenge with so many relationships is that all of us, because of how we were brought up, because of our past experience, because of our family history, none of us come into any relationship as a blank canvas. I mean, unless you're literally a newborn baby, you're a blank canvas. By the time we're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we've already developed personality, we've already developed a sense of dreams, we've already developed some picture of a preferred future, we've already had certain parts of our attitude shaped. By the time we're an adolescent teenager, we're in secondary school and trying to figure out who we are, those things are solidifying even more to the point where when we finish secondary school, get into employment or into college or graduate college, so much of our hopes, so many of our dreams, and so much of our desires are already set in place. Now, here's the thing. When we're single, before we get into an actual relationship in this sense, when we're single, these things are there. The pieces are there, but loosely. They're not so much developed. If you're engaged or hoping to be engaged, I'm hoping that some of these things we're going to talk about today are becoming or are developing through conversation and through the intimacy of your relationship. But by the time we get married, by the time we move into a commitment to marriage, a marriage relationship, a lot of these things begin to solidify. So help us kind of understand this, and we're going to use a visual illustration. All of us come into relationships with some degree of what we're going to call a dream box. And this is a demo dream box. And in this dream box are our hopes, our dreams, and our desires. And all of us have these things. They're not bad things, they're not wrong things per se. They're just things that we have. And if we're going to be happy, we have to be able to acknowledge this. And there are a lot of things in our dream box that can either add to or take away from the value and the quality of what we experience in relationship. At some point, for example, when you get in a relationship, whether you're engaged or married, you're going to start talking about simple things like money. Like, who's going to earn the money, who's going to work, who's not going to work, you're both going to work full-time, when are you going to work part-time, when are you going to stay at home? Are both of you going to earn so much money you both can stay at home? What are you going to do when it comes to budgeting? What would Dave Ramsey say? Are you going to have loans, not have loans? Is there debt? What's your plan for debt? How important is money in the priority scale? Is money everything? Is money nothing? Are you happy having a lot of money? Are you not happy having no money? At some point, the whole relationship with money is going to have to be discussed, because we all have some hopes, dreams, and desires when it comes to money. Not only that, but we also got to talk about, if we're going to be together, chores. Who's going to do the cooking? Who's going to do the washing up of the cooking? Whose job is that? Maybe in your family of origin, there was a certain expectation from, your background as to who did what, who played what part. Who's going to hoover? Who's going to bring out the bin? Who's going to wash the car? At some point you have to have conversations about chores and how that's all going to work. Another conversation you're going to have is what are you going to drive? Are you going to drive a sports car? Are you going to have a convertible? Will it be like a family car? Will it be two cars? How much money will you spend on your car? Are you willing to go into debt for your car? What kind of brand of car? Again, your family origin will influence this. Another key part is going to be your scheduling. How much time are you going to spend together? How much time are you going to spend with friends? How much time is it okay to spend together? How much time is it okay to spend not together? What is your weekly kind of schedule going to look like? What are your priorities? Are you going to spend all your time together where, basically if we get married, there's no time for friends? Or is it that, I want you to come meet my friends, or I don't want you to meet my friends, or I want this relationship to be here and my relationship with them to be over here? At some point, you have to talk about your scheduling and all the other relationships in your life and how this primary relationship and all the, again, hopes, dreams, and desires are going to impact your scheduling. Eventually, as you move towards marriage, you're going to talk about, where do you plan to live? Are you going to have a home? Is it going to be a big home? Is it going to be a small home? Are you happy sharing a home? Are you happy living in a tent, a caravan? At some point, you have to have the conversation about what does your dream home look like, and what are you prepared to do to get this dream home? That's a huge part of every relationship. Think about it. With the single greatest debt that most couples will take on in their lifetime is a mortgage. Paying for a home. So it's a huge part of the conversation. It's kind of bringing to the table what each of our, again, hopes, dreams, and desires are for our home. Again, at some point in a relationship, you're going to have to unpack the calendar and start thinking about the year, Like, what are you going to do with extended family? What are you going to do with things like Christmas? Are you going to spend Christmas with your parents or the in-laws? What way is it going to work? Some you might say, well, we'll compromise. I'll take 2 or 3 holidays. I'll take Christmas, New Year's, and Easter, and you can have the rest. What is the rest? You could have Halloween. You could have All Souls Day. You could have the one bank holiday in August. At some point, tension is going to be created as you start looking at your calendar and trying to figure out, what days go where. Where are we going to spend those vital holidays? With whom are we going to spend those vital holidays? And this conversation becomes even more complex as we move on to the next question, which is, what about kids? Are we going to have kids? No kids? A kid? If you're an only child and you're brought up by yourself, you maybe are thinking, it's not enough to have one kid. We need to make sure that kid's got a little compadre. So we're going to have, kids plural. But you know what? You kind of have maybe 2 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. You decide to keep going. So you decide, hey, why not add one more? And so all of a sudden you have, 3 beautiful children. But because Lord blesses you, have twins, and so you get a little unexpected surprise. So how many kids are you going to have? What are your dreams, expectations, and hopes when it comes to kids? And after houses and cars and money and scheduling and chores and calendars and all and kids, at some point you got to think about what are your dreams, hopes, and aspirations for travel. Do you plan to travel a lot? If you go on holidays, will you go abroad? Will you go maybe fly Aer Lingus and go to somewhere in Europe? Will you fly to the US? Will you fly to Africa? Will you drive to Donegal? At some point, the conversation is going to have to be had as to what the dreams and hopes and desires are surrounding raising your kids and having holidays. And again, for some people, that's a really, really big deal. Another key area, especially for the guys, and this is funny, I have to laugh at this, is the expectation, the hopes, dreams, and desires of what your wife is not going to wear. Because ladies, you think, all he wants is for me to be warm and comfortable so he can cuddle me, and just being honest, that's just not true. And so at some point the conversation is going to have to have, what kind of attire is appropriate for going to bed? And the whole area of bed and sex life and what's going to happen in that and where the boundaries lie and where the lots fall, it's a huge conversation, especially if you have any kind of past experience in that area. What about this very important part of how we hope to have a relationship? What about conflict resolution? I mean, how are we going to fix some things? You know what I'm saying? I mean, when things aren't working out, when things aren't going according to plan, what's our plan to fix each other up? I mean, some of us come from family backgrounds where, you know what, raising our voice and screaming and shouting and just having out and throwing plates, that's how you do it. Some of us come from family backgrounds where it's the complete opposite. As you kind of come into a relationship, at some point we have to have the conversation from our dream box as to what our hopes, dreams, and desires are regarding each one and all of these areas. Now, there are a couple of things that kind of go into shaping our dream box. First of all, what we've seen and heard. As we've been brought up with parents or guardians or our grandparents, as we maybe get into a relationship with them, we have in-laws, another set of kind of parents. These things that we see, these things that we hear, these things play a huge part in shaping what goes into our dream box. Not only what we've seen and heard, but also what we've experienced in our own family of origin. I mean, no one is more influential in our future or our current family than the family that we come from, good or bad, like it or not. It just is a huge factor in influencing and shaping our dream box. But there are other things that shape and determine what goes into our dream box, and that's ultimately us, because the biggest problem with the dream box idea is that it's ours. It's my dream box. It's me. It's the sum total of the things that have shaped me, the things that have created dreams and hopes and desires. And this is where the problem is. The problem isn't with any one of these things. The problem is the complexity of me that goes with these things. You see, we tend to, because of where we've come from, we tend to put things into this box to either avoid things that we've seen, heard, or experienced, or to recreate things that we've seen, heard, or experienced. As we looked at our own parents' marriage, or our own parents' family, or we looked at things that they did or didn't do, we're making decisions constantly with our dream box as things that we do want to do, that we do want to recreate, that we do want to emulate, and some things that, of course, we don't. Things that we want to avoid. And despite our best efforts to make the dream box a neutral, winning plan, the complexity is always, like I said, the fact that no dream box is perfect. No perfect list can be perfect. Why? Because it comes from imperfect people. And so what happens is we come into this relationship with all these hopes, dreams, and desires, and essentially as we walk down the aisle, we're not just giving away our hand and our heart, we're also giving away our dream box. I mean, in one sense, what a marriage ceremony is nothing more than a swapping, than a handing over, than a kind of a dropping of a dream box from one person to the other. And what we do when we say "I do" is we take the hand of the person, take the heart of the person, but we also say, "Hey, here's my dream box, and I want you to make these things come true." I've come into this relationship with some sense of hope that by marrying you, that by choosing you, by doing life with you, that you're going to help me make all this become possible, which wouldn't be a problem if only one person came into the relationship with their dream box. The challenge is that you have two unique individuals coming into one relationship with a whole set of hopes, dreams, and desires, and all the background that goes with it. Another part of the challenge with this, of course, is that your dream box, what's a dream box to you, doesn't really feel like a dream box to the other person, does it? Because when you kind of come along and you say, hey, here's my dreams, here's my hopes, here's my desires, what feels like something that's creative and full of potential and beautiful and meaningful and should happen for you, doesn't really feel so much fun for the other person, does it? No, because as soon as we drop this dream box on the other person, it changes, it becomes something different. It becomes heavy, it becomes a burden, it becomes a weight. It becomes not a dream box, but a box of expectation. And all of a sudden, what was to us hopes, dreams, and desires becomes to the other person a burden of weight, a box of expectation. And the problem with this is that as we get into relationships, as we kind of enter with a box of expectations, the bigger the box, the higher the bar, the heavier the weight, the more difficult it becomes for the other person to not only enjoy the relationship, but to add value to the point where we can enjoy the relationship also. Now, the word expectation is actually defined as, an expectation is a strong belief that something will happen or will be the case in the future. It's a strong belief that something will happen or will be the case in the future. So at first we go, well, I'm marrying this guy, but he hasn't got a great job yet, so he doesn't have the money yet. He won't be able to buy the house yet. We don't drive the car yet. And so for a period of years, we're willing to overlook or let go of the intensity of our desire for these things. But at some point in the relationship, year 3, year 5, year 10, year 15, year 30, year 50, things begin to break down, almost like the car analogy I mentioned a while earlier. As the miles clock up and we get less and less, we move further and further away, or the likelihood of these things becoming a reality, these expectations becoming a reality, then all of a sudden things can begin to break down in our relationship. And this is really crucial. This is why so many people experience so much strain and stress in their relationships. You see, the problem is when we attempt to recreate or avoid something from the past, when we attempt to, because of what we didn't like in our upbringing, or because of what we do want to emulate in our upbringing, when we try to recreate in our own strength a future of hopes, dreams, and desires, when we try to avoid or try to recreate, what happens is that this box transforms from being something that's fun and creative and life-giving into something that's burdensome and difficult and heavy. And actually, at some point, if it's not discussed, if it's not brought into the open, if it's not dealt with, can actually become quite destructive. It becomes the weight of expectation. And what happens is two people come into marriage, and what they do is they throw these two boxes together, and these things collide. And somehow in all the chaos of all this collision, these two individuals have got to figure out who they're going to be and what they want to do and what they want to devote their lives to. Because there's no we in relationship, there's I. There's two I's. And I want to kind of give you a couple of kind of practical points as to what happens when I's collide. What happens when I's collide? I want to give you 4 things that happen when I's collide this week, and I'm going to give you the 5th one next week in part 2. So the first thing that we do when I's collide is, well, simply put, we leave. We say, well, hey, if you're not going to meet my expectation, if you're not going to help me to make my hopes, dreams, and desires come true, if you're not on board, if you're not game, if you're not up to this task, this challenge, this responsibility, well, you know what? I'm just going to take my box and I'm going to leave. And off we go. But of course, what happens is we take this box, this now damaged box, we tear out of the relationship, we go, we wander for a while, we find another relationship, and the same cycle happens. It may take a while, but eventually we'll land at a point in the next relationship where we're handing over that box again, expecting someone else to do what the other person in the first relationship couldn't do. And this is so prevalent, and this has caused so much pain and heartache and turmoil in so many lives, especially the lives of the children. Maybe you're here and you're a child of two parents who went through some kind of stress in the relationship, and that's what happened. The dream box was torn apart, and these two people separated and went their different ways. So the first thing that we do in response to collision, the eye colliding, is we leave. The second thing that we do is we win. We recognize, well, we're not going to leave. We want this thing to work, but one of us has to power up and overpower the other person, so we win. In other words, where me leaving is saying, if you can't carry the responsibility of my expectation, I'm taking my box elsewhere. We winning is actually me saying that, these two boxes can't coexist, so my box is actually better than your box, so let's just get rid of your box because your box doesn't really matter. Your box is irrelevant. Your box is not the right box. I mean, I'm more experienced. I've seen the world. I've got a degree in this. I've read the book, whatever. I have the money. I have the job. I have the background. So trust me, your box really is not the right box. It's a good box. It's an admirable box. It's just not the right box. So let's put that over here and let's focus together on building my box. And again, although that might seem on the surface like two people working together, actually it's quite destructive. And let me just say this off the back of that. If you want to destroy your relationship, if you want a miserable relationship, I'm going to give you the 4 C's of the 4 key ingredients that are 4 C's of a miserable relationship. So here they are. So if you're like, I want my relationship to be miserable, here's how you create a miserable relationship. And it begins with winning. And winning has 4 different sides to it. The first one is we try to convince the other person. We try to convince them that essentially what's in my box is better than what's in your box. We try to get them to rationalize with us, to come to the conclusion that their box is really not the best box. I've already kind of mentioned this, but basically we try to convince them that their box is irrelevant. The second one is we try to convict them. So in the convincing comes the conviction, and in the convict phase, the second ingredient of a miserable relationship, we basically try to make them feel guilty about what's in their box, the box itself, even suggesting another box other than our box. So if we can't convince them, we'll move into another realm of trying to convict them and make them feel so bad that they will give up their box. If that doesn't work, we move into the third C, which is one of control. That's where we assume the position of manipulation, and we begin to try to manipulate what's in the box, the order of the box, what should or shouldn't be in the box, the entire box itself. And so after convincing and convicting, we move into controlling. If that doesn't happen, eventually we get into this place of coercing, of coercion, of coerce, where basically now we create innuendo. And through the creation of innuendo about what's in the box and the box itself, we try to win people over to submitting their box to our box. We say things like, it's no big deal. You have your dreams, you have your hopes, you have your desires. But you know what? If they don't go, I'm leaving. Oh, I'm only joking, but I might. And all of a sudden, what happens is, through trying to convince and convict and control and coerce, is these 4 ingredients of a miserable relationship all begin to erode the one key thing to a healthy relationship, which is, of course, trust. Trust. Because any relationship that is built upon trying to convince the other person to give up who they are, or trying to convict the other person to feel guilty, or trying to control the other person or coerce them, eventually these things will erode and eat away at the base of a relationship, which is, of course, trust. And so the second thing we try to do when eyes collide is we win. The third thing then is we conform. So again, eyes are colliding, don't want to leave, can't really win. What's the third option? The third option is we conform. We say, well, these 2 boxes can't coexist. So one person has to eliminate their box, has to remove their box, and the other box take precedent. So when we conform in a relationship, we basically give up who we are in order to become who we're not. And again, this might seem noble or even admirable at first, but let me tell you, it is toxic and it is deadly to a relationship. The idea that we to give up who God has made us to be and the hopes and dreams and desires that He has given us just for this relationship to work is not healthy. And when we try to conform and give up who we are, we can't be happy. And if we're not happy, eventually, again, the trust component will begin to break down. So when eyes collide, we leave, we try win, we conform. The fourth and final one is we compromise. We say, you know what, well, if I don't want to leave and I don't want to win and I don't want to give up who I am and become like you, so I'm going to compromise. We're going to come to an agreement, a contract, as to what's in your box and what's in my box and how these things shall coexist. The challenge with this one is that a compromising relationship is one that is built on keeping score. It's all about keeping score. You said you would. Your part of the bargain was this. You didn't fulfill. Literally, compromising relationships are committed to the wrong thing. Why? Because even though compromise is good in general, in all relationships, when our relationship is built on compromise, we're committed to the wrong thing. We're committed to the relationship more than we're committed to each other. We're committed to the marriage more than we're committed to the person. And if we're committed to the marriage, if the basis of our commitment is the marriage and the agreement and the contract and saving face, then not only can we not be happy, but we're not going to be healthy. We can't have a healthy relationship if the whole thing is built on a compromise that keeps score, destroys trust, and only exists to keep the marriage alive and have the connection that we have with the person. What's the summary of these first four things? The summary is quite simple. When eyes collide and we try win, and we try, or we leave, or we try conform, we try compromise, every time eyes collide, we loses. When eyes collide, we loses. Now, despite those first four options, there is a fifth option. This fifth option is an option that happy couples know. And next week, I'm going to unpack that fifth option. But I do want to say this as we kind of get on with today's message. There's a key part in all this. I lay a foundation. I want to kind of turn to the scripture now for just a moment. And I want to introduce to you a key thought that's going to not just permeate this message and this series, but actually I believe permeates our entire Christianity, our entire human experience, and all of our relationships. This key thought is found in the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, and we're going to read verse 1 and verse 2. The Apostle Paul, he writes this letter to a church just like ours in a city called Ephesus, which is in modern-day Turkey. And in these two verses, what we see is he picks up on an idea, on a truth, on a principle that Jesus spoke about in the Gospels to his disciples many times while he was here on earth. And it kind of echoes and is connected to and is the fruition or the complement of something that God spoke through Moses many, many years earlier in the book of Exodus. And here's what it says in verse 1. It says, "Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children." And here's the key, "Walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God." There's a ton in this, and again, we're going to build on this over the next couple of weeks. But just that phrase, walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us. You see, I want you to think about this today in the context of our relationship with God. That if our relationship with God was built on God's expectations of us, then not only would we not have a relationship with him, but no one would. Why? Because a relationship that's built with a deity on expectation is a relationship of religion where somehow we're trying to carry the weight and the burden and the load of their expectation. And what happens in our relationship with God, and the same thing happens in our relationship with each other, is that when a relationship is built on expectation, it creates a debt and debtor relationship. It creates a debt and debtor relationship. This idea that I owe you or you owe me. You owe it to me to do this. You owe it to me to make this come true. You owe it to me. You've done things or didn't do things or said things or did say things or, promised things or didn't promise things. And because of this track record, you owe me to make these expectations become a reality. Again, take it a step further. Because of our family origin, because of how we were brought up, there's an expectation of how things are supposed to be done. For example, one of the things that I love doing when we do pre-marriage counseling with young couples that are going to get married, or not just young couples, but any kind of couples, when we do pre-marriage counseling with these couples who are in this engagement phase and wrestling with some of these tensions, one of the questions I want to ask them is in your family of origin, who did these simple chores? For example, whose job was to bring out the bin? Like in every family, it's generally one person's job to bring out the bin. And for one person, it might be their dad. For another person, it might be their mom. Another person might be something different. And so what happens is in something simple as the question is, who brings out the bin? We see the contrast of how, because of how we were raised, because of what we experienced, because of what we've seen and heard, we believe this is how things are supposed to be. This is what a man is supposed to do. This is what a woman is supposed to do. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what I'm supposed to. Literally speaking, this is what's expected. This is what's expected because of my background. This is what's expected of a man. This is what is expected of a woman. What that creates is this indebtedness that because it's an expectation, and because it's as true as anything to you because of your upbringing, therefore you owe it to me to do this because this is what men or this is what women are supposed to do. Let me ask you a question. This is really critical as we think about this thought and as we kind of build this tension. Here's the question. How much gratitude do you express to people who pay you what they owe you? I'll ask it again. How much gratitude do you express to people that don't give you gifts or surprise you, but they pay you what they owe you? Let me give you the answer. Minimal. When someone pays us what they owe us, we give them the minimal amount of gratitude that we can possibly express. Maybe a polite thank you, but nothing really meaningful, nothing really significant. Why? Because, let's be honest, they owed it to us. And this is the problem with this. This is where this stuff breaks down, not only in our relationship with God and our worship and appreciation of Him, but also in our interpersonal relationships with each other. The truth is this: we rarely express gratitude for what we've come to expect. Oh, think about that. We rarely express gratitude for what we've come to expect. In other words, I'm not going to thank you every time you do it, but I will ask you every time you don't. When something that was done in goodwill becomes an expectation, when someone's expression of love to us becomes an I owe you an expectation, then even though we say, even though we get into this dynamic where we say we don't expect it, but really we do. Why? Because the simple things at the beginning of the relationship you'll be so enamored by and so blown away by, as the clock rolls by, as the calendar flips over, as the years go by, we don't feel the need to say thank you, but we do feel the need to pull people up when they don't do certain things. Why? Because they become an expectation. Do you know what gratitude is in this context? Do you know? And this is so key because gratitude is a huge part of having any kind of happiness in any kind of relationship. Gratitude is saying to the person, I did not expect that. Well, I've washed your clothes for the last 10 years. Yes, he says, maybe you've done it for a long time, but I did not expect that. But I've made your lunch for the last 3 years. Yes, he says, but every day I walk down those stairs and my cup of coffee is waiting at the table, I understand that this is not something that you owe me. It's not something that you're supposed to do. It's something that you're doing as an expression of your love and affection towards me. So therefore, because of this, every time I see that coffee, even though it's every day for 5, 10, 15 years, or that meal, or those clothes, or whatever it may be, those flowers on the table when I come home from work, I didn't expect that, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for this time as if it were the first time. This is so critical because the debt and debtor relationship dynamic actually eliminates the possibility of unconditional love. This is why God chose to send Jesus die on the cross, to do something about the brokenness of our relationship with Him. Why? Because in a debt and debtor relationship, there cannot be unconditional love. There can only be conditional love. I love you if you follow through on my expectations. Take that thought one step further. What does that mean? What it means is this: if I owe you, I can't love you. Because what I'm doing, I'm not doing out of love, I'm doing it out of a sense of debt. And that destroys the happiness and the health of every relationship. If I owe you this, I can't love you. Why? Because everything that I do, everything I try to do to express my love to you, you don't receive it as love. Why? You receive it as me doing what I was supposed to do. And all of a sudden, expressions of love become, as the years go on, the bar gets higher and higher and higher to the point where we feel like there's a vacuum of love in our relationship. Why? Because the things that were supposed to be expressions of gratitude and love and sincerity become expectations. Why? Because we hold the other person in debt to us because that's what they're supposed to do. You see, expectations remove the margin necessary for love to be recognized and appreciated. Expectations just suck out that space, that emptiness, the possibility for love to show itself, be recognized, and be appreciated. In fact, love requires margin. Love creates margin. And what happens over time is that, you can't even see it when it happens. When the other person is trying to express love, you don't even notice it. It goes beneath the radar. Why? Because what he's doing, he's supposed to do. It's what a man does. It's what a woman does. It's what a mother does. What a father does. Why should I be so overwhelmed when they do their job, when they do what's expected, when they do what they're supposed to do? That's why a box of expectation destroys intimacy. Because it takes what's supposed to be a relationship, not a commitment to a marriage, but a relationship between two people, and reduces it to a commitment to an establishment or the relationship itself, and sucks the love and trust out of it to a point where there's no health and there's no happiness, and everything becomes an I owe you. Even saying I love you, we say it because we feel a sense of indebtedness to the other person. And when the relationship gets difficult, what we do is we then say, oh, flip, the relationship's difficult, things are not working out, so I'm going to drop my box, attend to your box, and eventually if I meet your expectations in this relationship, then we're back to zero, but I can never do enough to show you or prove to you or express to you how much I love you, because when our relationship is built on a box of expectations, love is impossible. Now here's the good news. Here is the good news. And here's why we're doing this series. You don't have to live like this. If you're single and you want to be in a relationship one day, you got to listen. There's just so much advice, there's so much truth and power in this that can shape your future to make something beautiful. If you're here and you're engaged and you're thinking about getting married and you're in the process, then same thing. If you're married or if you haven't married, hey, there's things worth fighting for that are going to help you to get healthy and get happy. You don't have to live like this. There's a couple of key things that happy couples know, and next week we're going to build on this and we're going to explain this. And I believe as we implement these things, we too can be counted amongst those happy couples. But as we bring this thing to a close, as we kind of close off week one, I want to finish with a few crucial thoughts, a few things for you to take away and think about as you leave this place today. And the kind of obvious question is, well, if all this is true, then what do we do with our hopes and our dreams and our desires? What do we do with this box? If this is not the option, if this is not the right way, this is not the happy way, then what do we do? I mean, how do we resolve conflict if we can't do it in a way that creates expectation? What do we do with the dreams of travel? What about the kids? I mean, each one of these things, what do we do with this box if we're not going to end up here? And of course, the answer is quite simple. The best way to keep your hopes, dreams, and desires out of the expectation box is to answer this simple next question. And this is profound, so pay attention. The question is this: what do they owe you? How do you keep all this stuff in your box, not in their box? Simple. Answer this question. What do they owe you? What do you deserve from them? See, here's the thing happy couples know. Happy couples know that the answer to the question, what do they owe you, is nothing. They owe me nothing. I don't deserve anything from them. In fact, let me put it this way, this is a little bit of a taster for next week. Here's something that happy couples know is strange and weird and doesn't even make sense, but a lot of times happy couples are kind of strange and weird and don't make sense. They go through difficult times, they're so happy, life happens, they're somehow overcome and have peace and joy. Happy couples don't make sense. And here's one of the key principles, and one of the key things I want to give you as a takeaway to think about that make them happy. Happy couples understand, happy couples know that they owe each other everything, but they aren't owed anything in return. I'll say it again. Happy couples know that they owe each other everything, but they aren't owed anything in return. You see, it's called a submission competition, the race to the back of the line. And next week we'll unpack that and build on that. Happy couples understand that the way I keep my hopes, dreams, and desires in the right box is I live a life where I owe the other person everything, but they don't owe me anything. And that might seem a little bit strange at first, but next week we'll unpack that some more. So our time is up for part one. As we lay this foundation, again, you can kind of feel there's a lot of key pieces, a lot of tension in the room, a lot of tension in what I'm saying today. And that's okay, because I believe that by the end of this series, God's going to speak some things, give us some things, deposit some things into us, that every relationship that we have and every person listening to this today can have a happy relationship. But I want to give you some homework. Now, don't worry. It's not going to be corrected. No one's going to chase you up. You don't have to write it down. It's just 2 questions that I want to give you to take away, to think about between now and next Sunday, okay? And let me just give you a bit of advice also, by the way. If you're here today and you're with your significant other, your girlfriend, boyfriend, fiance, husband, wife, do not talk about this message in the car, okay? Don't go for a long drive home. Don't go stand in line for a long time. Don't talk about this, okay? Don't use this as your moment to power up and win. We just talked about that, okay? I want you as an individual to ask yourself these questions about yourself, okay? This is for you. 2 questions. The first one is, I want you to think about what's in your dream box. I want you to spend some time today and this week not evaluating what's in the other person's dream box, but what are your hopes? What are your dreams? And what are your desires? What are the things? What are your thoughts about the things that I've mentioned? What are your dreams? What's in your heart? It's going to become very important that you have some kind of, not concrete clarity, but a loose clarity as to what's in your dream box. And the second question I want to ask you and cause you to think about yourself is the answer to the question, who is carrying your dream box? Who is bearing the load of the expectation of your dream box? Who is the person in this season right now, in these next couple of days, that you have passed all your hopes, dreams, and desires onto? And next week, we'll pick up on that and build as we learn and figure out and grow and establish what happy couples know. I invite you to stand right now and we're going to pray. I'm just trusting God today because this, whenever you talk about relationships, and especially the nature of relationships, there can be a lot of different emotions that come to the surface. That's natural, that's normal. We're all emotional beings. But just as we stand right now, I'm going to ask you all to bow your heads and just close your eyes. Just a moment. I just want to pray for us all. And for every person in this cinema this morning, I'm just praying, Father, that no matter where we've come from, what we've been through, that you would just help us, Lord, in every relationship that we have. I just pray, Lord, that if anything's been done to harm us, if we've, Lord, been the receiving end of some of this toxicity, I just pray for healing today in our hearts. I pray that we'll be able to release those people, oh God, that maybe that we spent our lives living under the weight and burden of their expectations. We didn't have language before. We couldn't conceptualize it, but today, Lord, as we see this visual demonstration, we understand why it was so difficult. Today I pray for healing, oh God, for hearts that have been torn and broken by unfair expectations. I pray for the relationships today, God, that are in the debt and debtor dynamic. I just pray that you would break us free from that. We would walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us. And that we would learn the reality of this mystery of the next couple of weeks, what it means, Father, to be able to walk like Jesus walked. I pray, Father, help us to break out of toxicity. And Lord, as eyes collide, I pray that we wouldn't lose in our relationships. But that, Lord, as we ponder these questions, as your Holy Spirit continues to speak and minister to us, that, Lord, as we build through this series, that we will be counted amongst those happy couples. Help us to know, to grow and understand what happy couples know. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.